One provocation on brand. What's yours? And does anyone know it? And does anyone care? If you can't really answer them quickly and confidently, then you should probably come along and me.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Education Vanguard Show. I'm very happy to be joined today by Ewan McIntosh, and we're going to be having a conversation focused around, with Ewan, you can talk about lots of different things, but today we're going to be focused around school branding. And I have to say, I was a little nervous coming into this call because I think it was in 2023 at one of our events. Ewan said to me, all right, do the introduction for me, but don't be boring. And it was about 5 minutes before I was going to go up on stage. But I think, how can you introduce Ewan? He's one of those interesting people that's had varied backgrounds, so he brings that all of that experience to his work now. He's worked as a teacher in media, as an education consultant, covering areas from learning space design, school branding, and much more, school strategy. He's the originator of the concept of Teach Meets, an event format that we've adopted here at 21C. So all those educators that have had a drink on us, really, you have Ewan to thank for those drinks over the many years we've been doing Teach Meets. We've worked with you many times over the years and are pleased to be having him back in Bangkok in May 2026 for our inaugural Marketing and Admissions Conference, as well as the Lead to Succeed event. So welcome you into the Education Vanguard.
Thanks for making me sound so nice and it wasn't boring. Yay.
That's good. So you've worked with schools in, I think, according to your bio, over 70 countries. What common brand challenges do you see schools facing, no matter what their context? There's obviously a lot of diversity out there, but what are the common threads?
I think it's interesting that the work that we have done in strategy, which is helping schools work out what they want in the future, is probably the missing link. So when brand tends to suffer and people become aware that admissions are going down, people in the organisation are unclear about what the school is really about. Are we about, academic excellence at all costs kind of thing, or are we about raising a whole child? Are we? And then first signs of a creaking brand are where people don't understand why their initiative was knocked back. The criteria aren't clear, or they don't really know the expectations, or the expectations seem to shift over the course of a year. So you could say that a lot of that comes down to getting your strategy clear and simple in the first place, focused. But there's a second part of that, which is once you've got your language clear, once you've got your goals clear, how does that manifest itself in the words that people use, the things people see, and the way in which they talk about your organization? And brand is essentially what other people say about you. It's not what you say. That's marketing. Brand is what other people say about you. And a lot of schools don't really know that. They don't know that that's what brand is, and they don't know what people say about them. So brand strategy is about getting very clear on the answers to those two questions, then creating your strategy to connect slightly better together. It means inevitably when you do brand strategy, you do touch on strategy proper of a school, because nothing's ever perfect and strategy should evolve and move anyway. And so this is a good thing to do, but not just at the beginning when you're doing strategies of school, maybe midway through a strategic cycle, you actually look at a refresh of your brand as well, because you'll have evolved and grown, and so your brand should too.
So is it fair to say that brand strategy is downstream from strategy? Is that how you would characterize it?
No, they hold hands and skip along the road together. They go hand in glove. If you think about it, who's the chief communicator in a school? It's probably the director, and very close with them, it's probably the principals. They're the ones sending those weekly emails that nobody reads. They're the ones filling inboxes with too many emails. So they are both the key communicators and often the key problem in school communication. And so it's really important actually that it's side by side. You can't really do brand strategy unless your strategy as a school is clear. You can't really get clear on your strategy as a school unless you think about how you're going to vocalize that to everyone.
So just to follow up on that a little bit, so you're talking, I really like that definition of brand strategy is what other people say about you. So as a brand strategy, then is it about changing what people say about you? Or is it just about reflecting? How do you conceptualize that?
Well, it can be both. It kind of depends on your starting point. Where would you have to change it? Well, you would have to change it if, I mean, we actually look at this at day one on our course on brand strategy. Day one is saying, okay, you've got a brand. Every school has a brand, whether they think they do or not, because people talk about you. The question is, what right do you as a school have to win in the area that you think you're really good at. So, for example, if your school says we're really strong on a rounded education, which is a trope that we hear left, right, and centre. So we're really good at a rounded education. Well, the school next door can say the same thing. Now, they might not do it the same way as you, they might not do it as well as you, but they can say the same thing. Or if you say that you are really the only true international school in a particular city or part of a city, who says? And there's a great example of that in Turin. Turin, there's the International School of Turin. It's not actually in Turin, it's out in the country in a beautiful campus. It doesn't really matter to the students and the parents that put their kids there because that's the experience they're looking for. The local Italians, and I have lots of Italian friends from my university days who live in Turin in the area, they all say, la scuola americana. So they think it's the American school. Of course it's not, it's the international school. But then there's this competitor right in the centre of the city, right at the city gate, in fact, that puts huge full-page adverts in the local press, the kind of local press that the chattering classes would read. And it says the international school in Turin, which is factually correct. Now, they have a Cambridge curriculum, great, but essentially it's an Italian school with a Cambridge curriculum. It does not have an international mindset. It doesn't really have an international student body. So it's manipulating what it knows works, which is that people want like the idea of international, but at the end of the day, they want maybe an easier path towards graduating out of high school. This creates a huge problem, I would say, for the International School of Turin, because you've got this declaration on the one hand of we are this when they're not. And in the meantime, you've got a brilliant school doing beautiful things that's kind of left saying, no, you're not. The only response it can maybe give is a negative one, saying, oh, it's not. And that's where brand strategy would fail if they were to go down that route. Also, if they were to just lay on thick the heritage, like we've been here for a long time, that doesn't necessarily attract the local audience who are looking for something else. What are they looking for? We would have to go and speak to them to find out. We'd have to go and find out what is it that these people who we want in our school, they have to be the right fit, what is it that they are looking for? And one of the things might be proximity. Like, we live in the city. We don't want to have that drive up in the morning, 30, 40 minutes. We need something local. That could then inform the strategy of the school to say, you know what, we're going to have maybe not a satellite campus, but we're going to have a curriculum that takes students out into the city much more frequently, that helps them really harness the city that we're in. Work experience placements, maybe there would be an entrepreneurial side. Turin is arguably one of the most entrepreneurial cities in Italy, so maybe the school takes that entrepreneurial bent. So many strategic options that come from a question around the brand. Who are we? So that's a good example of, you got to know what your right is to win in the particular area that you've chosen. And that is why brand and strategy proper tie hand to hand. They cannot sit in separate offices. And I would have the communications or advancement director sat, if not in the same office as the director, with one of those little doors that opens through into their room, because they need to be talking about this constantly. They should be, arguably the deputy head of the school should be whoever's in charge of the brand.
I'm sure that the directors of marketing and admissions and advancement are loving to hear that.
They'll be cheering away quietly in Radio Land, yes.
Yeah. One thing I want to pick up on that you were saying that the biggest, voices for the school are the head and the principals. And I think quite often in schools, educators tend to think of marketing and sales, right? And we don't even really use that term sales, but enrollment is kind of dirty words, right? It's like, oh, we're in the education business, we're not in the marketing business. And so how do you differentiate what marketing is and what brand strategy is? And what is the role of the people that are not in the marketing office, right, per se, but they are the biggest voices for the school?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that educators, why would they necessarily? Educators don't necessarily understand the difference between marketing, brand, sales, admissions. That's all right. Most marketing people don't understand how to teach. I think that's okay. Everyone has their job to do. I think the biggest mistake schools can make, the biggest mistake any marketing person can make, is using the line, yes, but I bring in the money that keeps your job. And I've heard that, and it puts shivers down my spine. It's like a threat. Marketing, communications, admissions form the foot soldiers, if you like, the front line of delivering a brand strategy. but they may not and they should not be alone in defining that brand strategy, because actually the brand is what people say about you, which means none of these people have any control over what people say about the school. Interestingly, if you have a rubbish experience with your kid's classroom teacher, you hear about it at the dinner table. That's also brand. So if a teacher says, I don't like marketing admissions, I don't like the idea of being salesy, you're, as a teacher, being salesy every day in what you choose to do. So if you are a miserable person who we ask ourselves, why did you even enter teaching? Then you're probably presenting a poor brand image, no matter what your school is trying to do. If you're doing your very best by your students, which is 99.9% of the teachers that I meet, if you're doing well by your students, doing your very best, whether it's in a direct instruction mode, collaborative, super innovative, trying new things, doing things the same way you've done it for 30 years, but the kids are having a rich experience, whatever that experience is, that's part of the brand. So it's disingenuous for an educator to say they don't like marketing because they're doing it every day. For a senior leadership team, not to give marketing, communications and admissions enough time is a sin, because they really need to gain, as best they can, a strong understanding of what is going on in classrooms and the intention behind it, so that they can start to craft a story around that. Long story, a long line story. We call this the story zero. It's kind of like ground zero. It's the story from which all other stories come. Very few schools have that nailed. So when you have that dinner party tittle tattle, what's your school like? What does it do? Very few people have that tripping off their tongue. Most people would end up saying, yeah, we're a school. By the time they finish discussing it's a school. So it's super important not to diss your marketing, communications, admissions people, because they're part of your team if you're an educator. And likewise, if you're in the advancement team, those educators are also part of your team. You don't need to make friends with every one of them, but you probably do need to be in the ears of a few close allies who you can regularly use as your kind of brains trust to tap into what is the experience we're trying to create for the kids in their words, and then translate it from edu jargon into something that really makes sense to people outside. To the other point around marketing, describing what happens in the classroom in simple terms is all you need to do. Brand is not about sexing up whatever happens in a school. It's about describing what it is and leave the experience to talk for itself. That will be more than exciting for people. So brand, when school directors start getting into writing brand slogans, it's time to go home, because that's not their principal job. Once a core brand language has been developed, normally by the head of marketing / communications, would be in charge of signing off on that work, not the director of the school. Then it's down to the director of the school to figure out what day-to-day stories they're spotting that can amplify that message. But the message does not belong to the board, it doesn't belong to the school director. It should be proposed by the admissions team with whatever external help that they need to do that.
Yeah, one of the lines in the description of that is, how do you go beyond a slogan? And talking about how brand can influence the school as well. So how can a strong brand influence positively staff culture, student experience, or parental engagement? Because there's the aspect of telling the story of what is, but then does brand also feed back into what could be?
Yeah, it kind of sways between those two worlds, what's actually happening and what can happen. Probably a nice example of that in practice would be, it's easy, if you like, brand strategy is easy when things are failing, when things are going badly, because we can spend a little bit of money and make that money back in weeks by the first student that comes through the door. And I think a lot of schools don't frankly place enough budget into developing brand strategy on an ongoing basis. They do an occasional big splurge, but there should be an annual budget to revisit this, test it out. Say your school's charging 20,000 a year, which is pretty modest in terms of fees. Many we work with are charging 40, 45 or more. Then, investing one student's worth of fees per year in just thinking about brand strategy is a mod investment, because you're going to make it back. And if they're a kindergartner who comes in, then you're making that back 13 times over. So the return on investment is really clear, and a director should not hesitate to, if you've got any spare cash at the end of the year, invest it in that, because you're going to get the money back many times over, and that gives you more to play with on other things. The International School of Brussels, during the pandemic, it actually came to NoTosh asking for some support with their early years section. Now, the early years section of the International School of Brussels is not in a position of needing to get more bums on seats. They are pretty full, to be honest, but they wanted to get that greater understanding both from existing families but also prospective families about what an early years education is. And a lot of families, a lot of grandparents paying for it as well, because this often falls outside corporate deals where they're paying for education. It's coming out your own pocket. A lot of parents and grandparents might look at early years and say, "Wow, that's a lot of money for childminding." And that was the kind of thing that they were saying because they didn't understand the difference between childcare and early years education. And the language used at the time was pretty technocratic. So it was describing and justifying in quite a high level way that was hard to cut through the fact that we're talking about a 3 or 4 year old. So we worked with the early childhood centre team to just listening to them, listening to everything that they did and why they did it with an educator's hat on. We looked at that and translated it into plain English. And just that simple act was really powerful. So we realised that the difference with them was that their teachers are guides who know how to set the spark for learning for life. That's a big difference now. Rather than being defensive and saying, yeah, we're not childcare and we're better than that, and that's where it was more kind of proactively saying, we're going to set your kid up for life. And it's here's everything. We believe that young learners deserve to work with experts in the field of learning. And the implication is, if you're not putting your kid with us, you're probably not putting them with experts, and that's on you. So it's all, everything said is, and one of the things bit of advice I'd given any brand strategy, always have this attitude of relentless positivity. Something I learned working on the election campaign in 2011 for the SNP, one that swung the election 38 points. It's a huge swing in 100 days flat. And the main difference was we went from the party feeling that they were in the doldrums and that everyone was against them, because they were, to a relentless positivity and not letting, it was that kind of Michelle Obama thing, when they punch low, we go high. And it was that positivity relentlessly. And if you look at the Early Childhood Centre page of the International School of Brussels, you see that relentless positivity coming through, which inspires confidence. The effect, of course, on the team is that when I saw them in their initial parents' evening, they did a great job, but it was still quite in that technical justification of why we do, a bit like a doctor justifying every cut of the scalpel. Second time, one noticeable difference, given it was all online, everyone turned their cameras on eventually, whereas previously they'd all had their cameras off. And they turn their cameras on because it's people you want to hang out with. Their relentless positivity is infectious, and the number of questions coming from parents and grandparents was much higher. And I just found that as a bit of informal data really interesting. So get brand strategy right. It brings people closer. It helps people have a more positive intent when they come to work. They know what everyone else is there to try and do. It provides the leader with their daily line. It says, this is what we are here to do. And every story that gets told by anyone from that point spins out of that hub that you've designed.
I like how you're talking about moving beyond edgy jargon, right? I think a
Yeah,
lot of school websites marketing can have edgy jargon that is meaningful to the educators, I put it there, but for parents, they're not getting a degree in education to decide what school to send their kids to. And then the edgy
100%.
jargon tends to be the same on every school website anyway, so it all kind of cancels each other out to some degree. So I think
100%.
that you're talking about, creating unique words that speak to people in a language that they understand.
Interestingly, when you speak plain English and then just describe stuff that goes on in your school, you are unique. It works every time. It's probably the easiest trick in the book. And then couple with that, the one in the course, we designed it in a way that we were kind of front loading some of the structures you need just to get your thinking straight. But then in a second sprint, we really put it to practice. And in the pre-conference, we're going to try and do both of those things in a kind of microcosm of a day. When you start putting it into practice, one of the first pieces of advice is always to show, not tell. And just go and look up any school website right now on your phone as you listen to this, and you'll see that most school websites are telling you stuff. They're not really showing you academic excellence. They're just telling you, we are academically excellent, believe us, please. And if you were to show academic excellence, what exactly does that look like? And what I would say, it's not your exam results, it's something else. So you can do an audit of your own website now and just say, are we showing people or are we just telling them? And if you're not giving examples and stories, if you're not telling stories about these things, then you are guaranteed very samey. You're compared to other schools. You're going to be wallpaper. So that's an easy to say, hard to do thing because it's cultural too. Here's a little telltale sign that you're in the business of telling rather than showing. The person in charge of communications in the school, if they find themselves having their routine, like their diary, is untenable because they keep getting whipped over to one side of the school to shoot a photograph about this and then over to the other side of the school to shoot a little video about that. Guaranteed that those stories are not strong enough to show what the school is about. What you'll be doing is, okay, you're showing a football match, but what is it that you're showing me through that? You're showing me that you have sports. Great. The brand, if you've done brand strategy work properly, there'll be an overarching thing, an idea, a brand identity that you're trying to show through every story. And that means that when the call comes through, can you grab a video or a photo of this particular thing happening? You're looking to your wall where you've got your brand pyramid and you're looking at it thinking, what is it as a school we are trying to show people at the moment in our current campaign of communication? And if this thing doesn't actually tie to it, and the thing I'm doing at the moment really does, then I'm going to prioritize the thing that does. I'm going to have to say, we'll grab footage, or we've got plenty of footage of kids playing football, but that's not what we're trying to show at the moment. So knowing what you're trying to show at any one time comes down to having a really clear brand identity, first of all, on which everything sits, and then knowing that at any given point in time, what's the campaign, what's the message that we're trying to put forward at that particular point. And that's crucial to think in those organised terms. Otherwise, what people get is whoever was loudest at asking for the video to be shot is what appears in the Instagram feed. And what is that in most schools? It is sports, number one. And the second thing is maybe, well, in little bursts, you get musicals and musical performances. But primarily it'll be sports fixtures. It's very rare to see a maths class in a featured video on the Instagram of a school showing something incredible that the school's doing, because on the face of it, there's nothing to see. But if you know what you're trying to show people, you can take a photo of kids learning maths and it'll be the most interesting Instagram video on your feed. But if you've not done your homework, if you don't know what you're trying to show, if you don't know what the campaign is at the moment, if you don't know what the overarching brand identity of the school is, get your running shoes on and go and take photos of sports, because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, something photogenic, I guess, right? As opposed to authentic, perhaps. Yeah.
Exactly. You can have
Yeah.
photogenic moments. Being photogenic is nothing to do with what you look like. It's to do with the story you're sharing.
Yeah. How important is it for students to be telling the story, but like to have the voice of the student in the brand strategy, the brand campaigns, the marketing?
It depends. I like it. What I don't like is where the kids clearly been fed the auto cue. And sometimes that just comes because, especially if they're in like a DP in the IB program, they've been conditioned for 10 years of their schooling life to speak in a particular way with all this jargon. So they're actually using the jargon that we're trying to eliminate in the brand strategy. And it can come over as a little bit trite when they kind of project what they're doing and why it matters, and can come over as a little bit fixed. How you I don't know, catch them off guard, how you get something a little bit more authentic. I've only ever managed to do that by having roundtable discussions with them, where you break through all that bluster in the first 5 minutes, and then eventually you get into the deep conversations. And if you could set up a little train track and a camera around those roundtable discussions, but just wipe the first 5 minutes of discussion where everyone's kind of playing their game, you get some really honest discussion. I think there's probably some technique that could be used there. I've also seen schools where it's the opposite, where the kids don't really have much to say. You see because of the way it's been contrived, not because the kids don't have anything to say, but because it's the way it's been contrived. Each kid gets a word. Give me a word to describe the school, and you get this. Oh, no, it's game show-esque. It's not. That's not how you go about engaging young people in describing what makes school special to them. So I think you have to Yes is the simple answer. Get students' voices in there. No is the answer if you're going to kind of dictate the terms of how they're going to express themselves so narrowly that they don't really express themselves, or you're going to do it in such a way that you don't support them to be authentic and speak like a kid.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. The reason I asked is I think I had to put my kids into schools over the last 12 months. So looking at a lot more school websites through the parent lens than I had before. And it
Yeah.
really struck me the difference between ones where you could tell it was something where it was something they captured that was authentic versus something that was definitely, as you say, an auto cue or, you know, as you say, like especially international school kids, they know how to play the game, right? They know how to
Yeah.
do what's expected of them in a given situation. So breaking through that is a challenge.
The use of kids in admissions is interesting as well. So I'm not sure about kids giving tours, particularly in very large schools, because it's going to take a lot of kids out of class for a long time. Also, there is a skill to an admissions tour that ties back to brand strategy. It's one of the toughest things actually. Is admissions teams often work in some isolation to brand strategy, and bringing them in can be hard work because they've got their way of doing things, and it's quite delicate to say, yeah, don't do it like that. We're going to do it like this instead. This is going to be more coherent. But I think there is an opportunity in the visit to school, particularly if the kid's there, and hopefully the kid is there. I know that a lot of people do virtual school visits because they have to. But if you have the opportunity to have kids on campus, find a way with some really nice kids to get them having lunch together and hanging out, or getting playing some sport. Tell them to bring their sneakers, and you'll give them some gear to put on. That can be something that helps them feel part of a community, and then give them the gear home with them. Let them have the shirt, let them have the
Mm.
shorts or whatever it's a small gesture. It costs $50, but it's a small gesture. It means that they take away their sweaty sports
Mhm.
gear from having a go. They're in with you, and I think that kind of gesture can go a long way with the kid in particular.
Yeah, I was just talking with someone in a school in China recently, and she was talking to me about how what she's observed is quite often it's the students themselves making the decision about what school to go to,
Very
right?
often.
Not even the parents. And so, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to just take a quick step back
Yes.
and ask you, you know, because you do have this very interesting, very career path, right? Not always in education. So I wonder if you could just reflect a little bit on on your background and what that brings to the work that you do now in terms of helping schools with brand.
It was really interesting. I have the Time Hop app that reminds you how old you are by showing you things that happened in the past. And on this day, 17 years ago, I had my first day at Channel 4 television and got my ID badge. And I took a photo of it for posterity. And at Channel 4, I was what they call a commissioner, a digital commissioner. So I was responsible for finding £50 million and then investing as much of it as possible in really interesting technology startups and design firms around the country. And all the firms, so Channel 4 doesn't make anything, it commissions other people to make beautiful things, but we have an editorial line, we have a brand, if you like, a brand strategy. And I remember at the time, I'd get about 3,000 ideas a year to consider, and we would invest in maybe 30 in total. And it was always really hard saying no to people. But one of the hardest things was explaining to really good ideas why it was a no from us. And it was because it didn't fit with the brand. But describing why not to someone who's not in the brand was really hard. And it was almost like you do not watch the channel. If you watch the television channel, you would feel what the brand is and you would know that this is not a fit. So that was where I discovered the first thing of being able to articulate your brand is vital to get the best out of people around you. If you can't articulate your brand, you're going to waste the time of 2,970 people who otherwise should have sold their idea to the BBC. The other thing I learned is that of the 30 or so companies that I was investing in, when I got them together for networking and drinks and to talk about their ideas, they're all competing with each other in some ways. They're often in the same industry. And yet they could talk about their projects, talk about their work with a lingua franca that was incredible. And it's actually what led me to creating NoTosh, no nonsense in Scots. Because it's the fact that in education we'll have people saying, yeah, I'm going to, what's our definition of learning? Let's spend 9 months working out what learning looks like. And you don't get that in creative circles. They kind of know what they do and they just talk about the work. And I wanted to just talk about the work. I wanted people to be talking about the work and making things, beautiful things happen. So it was a really formative experience for me outside education completely. for just under 2 years, and getting away from all of that and all of the politics of the classroom and of school, and then bringing some of those lessons back into schools, realizing just how hard it is to get people to play together in a school environment, mostly because people are not in control of their own timetabling, but also just the sheer quantity of work. And schools, even with very large staffs, are often quite inefficient places because of the way that time is managed for people rather than by themselves. So there's a limit to how effective and efficient people can be because of that. So I was doing digital media investing and digital media strategy and creating products. Even when I started NoTosh, one of the first partners that I had was this firm, Northern Film and Media, looked after the media investment in the north of England. And we created the world's first ever iPad investment fund. Now, it was probably one of the world's smallest iPad investment funds, but it didn't matter. We're still in the Wall Street Journal. We got ourselves everywhere for that. But being on the bleeding edge of whatever was coming out, investing quite heavily in new ideas to see what sprung. And we launched, over those, I'd say over I've probably invested for about 3.5, 4 years in digital media. And the firms have gone on. One of them, has been bought over 3 times now. $285 million was the last sale that they were bought over for. Hugely successful companies that started out as 2 guys in a loft in Dundee, now producing some of the world's most addictive games, video games. And you look at firms like that and say, yeah, it's really blindingly successful because they know what they stand for. They know their brand, and they know how to just keep knocking out hits that tie around that brand. So I think that I'll never lose that part now of my experience in my brain, but I realise when I'm in schools how foreign that way of thinking can still be for people. I love doing online courses because you spend more time with people than you do in a day. So that's why we still do so many online courses, despite the fact there's no pandemic anymore, because actually you get to know people better. And then when you do meet them up face to face, it's like old friends. It's harder to do. I meet people who say, oh yeah, I was at a workshop of yours 8 years ago, and I can't remember them because it was only 6 hours that we spent and there were 80 other people in the room, and so it's quite hard to remember. So I think that getting to know people allows you to have these harder conversations about the structure of how they organise themselves, how they organise their teams, how they might think differently, and you can start to infect people with this slightly different way of thinking that gets them restructuring their team, taking on a confidence and a positivity about their projects that they were maybe shy to do so before. And that's what makes all the difference. I'd say that every educator I've met who's had a job outside teaching, even if it's a volunteering thing that they do while having been a lifelong teacher, that changes who you are. And I would encourage everyone, think about not just the job, but what's the one side project that you do that takes you away from the classroom. Everyone in our team has a side project. Jeremy in Melbourne does cold drip coffee, beautiful brand that he sells in farmers markets in Melbourne and charges way too much money for, but people love it. Another project that our team is putting the first Australian commercial satellite into space. These are side projects. Side projects are what make us tick. My side project is behind me, drumming. It's playing in jazz big bands and trying to get back into maybe some musical theatre, playing in the pit. Everyone needs side projects, or not just hobbies, but things that you really kind of try to be the best at, I think, because it gives you so much learning that you can reapply to your day job, and it changes who you are for the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's fantastic. Can I ask, whether we're talking about, the gathering in Bangkok, what can
Yeah,
people expect from the workshop? What's the day going to look like? What can people expect to take away? And who should be coming as well? What's
yeah.
a good group of people from the school to come?
So that's probably the first point, is that to get the most bang for your buck, and the biggest benefit is come as a team. If you come as an individual, you're going to have to then resell the ideas when you get back to base to the people that you need to do the work with you. As I've said, brand strategy is a team effort. So who should be in that team? Definitely the marketing comms people, probably an admissions person. And I would say bring the boss. The director of the school is the chief communicator of the school. So if you can bring the chief communicator of the school, or even better, the chief communicators, the principals as well, everyone's going to benefit, because this is about understanding together what it is you're trying to show people. So that's a theoretical thing. We'll definitely help you agree on this is actually what we're trying to show as a school. This is our key message. This is what we stand for. But really importantly is I'm going to provide some very pragmatic tools, and you'll make a start using them in the workshop. But they're the kind of tools that you put up on a whiteboard and you keep evolving over, probably 3-4 months as you speak to people, as you clarify your assumptions and, test your assumptions. So there's a benefit to everyone being there on day one, because you're going to have a lot less explaining to do as you go through the next 3 or 4 months. The second thing is that the tools that we give are going to be for those workshop participants. There will be some AI tools that will be on a kind of time limited basis. So it's useful to have the people in the room so that you can get started using them before the end of the academic session. But I'll also explain how you might go about making up your own. So whether you're using your Gemini or your ChatGPT or whatever, that you've got the smarts to go and work out how to create your own GPT and your own model. Why does that matter? Because when you're in the cut and thrust of a busy school year, and let's face it, May to June is a slightly easier time of year compared to the rest of it. When you're in the cut and thrust, when you're planning that speech for August, September, when you come back to school, it's really important to know your tone of voice, institutionally as well as personally. It's important to know what the key message, what's the main thing that you want to communicate to people, and then ensuring that everyone is communicating the main thing all the way through. When you get that stacking up on each other, the power of your brand is multiplied overnight. And if, as always, I'd say if cost comes in as a barrier, it's a derisory cost, to be frank. And just look at your fees. Even if your school is a state school and you're bringing in $6,500 per kid, that's on the low end, you're going to make that back with that one family, that one kid who chooses to come to your school instead of the competition because you got your act together. So I would recommend the more the merrier. And that means you can have some drop off if you need to. But I would say bring the boss, bring the advancement team, whoever is in it. And if you can get those principals to join too, just ahead of the Lead to Succeed, it fits like a glove. And you know what? I would also do this. We work with a lot of middle leaders. We run probably the premier middle leadership course on the planet. We've worked with hundreds of middle leaders over the past couple of years. And I know that some of those aspiring leaders, the ones with no job title, are also some of the most talented people in the school. They don't really actually aspire to be ahead of school. They just want to do good work and get better at what they do. If you've got some of them who might be interested in doing it, my experience is that they give many times over the effort and energy that the workshop itself costs. So in terms of the 7 hours we spend together. So I would definitely encourage looking at your middle leadership as well and seeing, I wonder if there's anyone there who would appreciate an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, and I think it's obviously, as you said, it's not a 1 day thing redeveloping a brand strategy, but I think going away from your school to another city potentially, if you're not in Bangkok, I think is also another way of kind of stepping outside of your regular day to day and the hustle and bustle of the school year, and thinking differently. I think, and having that opportunity to come together as a team. I think that's totally right. All right. Well, you've been very generous with your time, Ewan. I really appreciate it. And you've always got so many good insights to share. I wondered if you could share one maybe provocative question you want people to think about if you're a head of school or a director of marketing or admissions, to think about ahead of coming to Bangkok.
One provocation on brand. What's yours? Does anyone know it? And does anyone care? There you go. It's one question if you add
That's
commas. But I think that those are the questions. If you can't really answer them quickly and confidently, then you should probably come along and me.
that sounds great. I totally agree. Thanks a lot, Ewan.
A pleasure. Thank you.